Hello and welcome back. I hope you guys have been well. Hope you've been staying safe. You've been doing your work quite well. I've been happy with it. Today we are going to talk about Columbus. We're going to talk about 1492. Um, there will also be another lecture this week, over the weekend a little bit, where I'm going to talk to you about your final exam dash final project. We're going to do something a little different at the end of the semester, but I think you're going to like it. I think it's going to be much more interesting than your traditional sorts of exams. All right. So again, today we're going to talk about 1492. The end of the semester is coming. It is coming so fast. Okay. It is going to be here before you know it. So in order to do well in this class, I would really promote the fact that you want to stay up to date on your readings. Over the Thanksgiving break, you're going to have an opportunity to make up any work you've missed. I'm not going to give you any new work over that break because generally I find that the work I get out of that break is kind of garbagey. But when we get back, okay, from the Thanksgiving break, all right, which is not next week, but the week after next, we are pretty much done. Okay, so it is really coming. It's going to go fast, and you're going to have some work to do for me for the end of the semester. So again, today we are going to talk about 1492. Now, two things are important even before we begin to talk about 1492 and about Columbus, okay? Now, the first is the difference between two different things, all right? History and commemoration. What we're doing in this class is history, and that means that we look at a long narrative of events, events in which we have some people that we think do very good things and some people we think do bad things. Now, history is different from commemoration. I'm going to tell you about people that do a variety of actions, all of which are important to the historical narrative, but that does not mean we necessarily need statues, okay? So one of the discussion points we're going to have this week and next week, all right, is about the difference between someone who is part of the historical narrative and someone that society views as so excellent that we need statues of them. And I think as we see in our society today, we are beginning to realize largely the distance between those two things, okay? And if you want to think about it in another term, right? If you take the next version of this class, you will talk about Adolf Hitler quite a bit, but we don't really need statues of him around, do we? Okay, so history is one thing, commemoration is another thing. Let's move on. Secondly, it's vastly important, and in your PowerPoint that you're reading for today, I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but the first thing about it is to really nail down the idea, okay, that there are lots of people in the Americas before Columbus gets there. And they're waking up every day and they're going about their business and they have advanced, wonderful societies. All right. And so when we say that Columbus, quote, discovered America, we have to put that in quotes. All right. Because he only discovered it for European people. People over here in the Americas were living quite happily, never knowing or caring that Europe existed. Okay, so again, there are three main reasons that Europeans left Europe, largely beginning in the 15th century, the 1400s. Okay, now the first reason we're going to talk about is commercial. All right, there were trade routes that were running between Europe and other parts of Asia. These trade routes were largely about spices. All right, remember, European food is nearly unimaginably horrible. And we know that it's horrible pre 1492 because people were willing to take incredible risks for large amounts of money just to get spices to put on their food. All right. Pre 1492, there are no tomatoes in Italy. All right. All the spices, all the things, there are no chiles, there are no nothing. There's not really the same kind of chocolate, even. Coffee is very expensive. So, all the things basically that we New Mexicans think make life worth living, right? Chiles, chocolate, coffee, not there. Now, the second reason, again, are social and religious, okay? Europeans of the 15th century are venturing out from their home. They are finding new and different places. And one of the things that makes them want to do that is their religion. Now, it's very important to understand that the Christianity that is coming out of Europe in 1492, first of all, we are pre-Reformation, okay? And that means that the Catholic Church is the only game in town. And for successive almost generations, the church has been involved in a battle for Spain, okay? And this battle leads to the rise of people like Ferdinand and Isabella. And Spain, previous to this, had been controlled largely by Muslims since 711. Now, from 711 to 1492, which marks the fall of Granada, all right, which is way down on the southern tip of Spain, which was the last Muslim country in Spain. Again, this is a crusading Christianity, all right, a Christianity that sets itself apart from other faiths and believes in conquering those faiths by force, okay? And this is really important to understand why the interaction between indigenous peoples and especially Spaniards, all right, is so forceful and so unfortunate. And largely the reason for that is that all of the people that Spain begins to send to the New World have just gotten done reconquering Spain. All right, that's what they know how to do. These are not necessarily explorers in a traditional sense. The conquistadores come out of, again, generations of religious conflict. Now, the other thing that happens, and that's going to accelerate with 1492, okay, is a decline in the authority of the church. During the Black Death, the church could afford its believers absolutely no remedy. All right, these people went and they did everything the church said, and they prayed and they gave tithes and they did everything right, and they died in droves. And what happens in the Black Death is that people begin to question the authority of the church as the sole purveyor of knowledge in the world. And that leads them to look elsewhere, all right, to think, look, the church was wrong about the Black Death. What else are they wrong about? And 1492 is a major, major part of that, okay? It's going to lead towards the Reformation. Because in all the maps that the church had and all its knowledge, guess what? Them weren't there. The Americas. So the voyages of Columbus in 1492 come within a context of a Europe that is dynamic. It is changing. Okay, we've gone through the Black Death. We've gone through the Renaissance. Technology, new technologies are very important in all of this. All right. So basically, you have in the Americas filled with wonderful, wonderful civilizations in the 15th century. All right. You have the Aztecs, you have the Incas, you have people up and down the Rio Grande Valley here. You have all kinds of fascinating civilizations, again, that aren't losing one tiny bit of sleep because they don't know Europe is there. Then you have a Europe that is growing in wealth and power, growing in technological ability, and you pair that growth and that desire for greed, we'll talk about in a minute, with a very crusading kind of Christianity, and that's what you get. Now, finally, spices are big money, all right, big money. And what people are looking for, all right, is a way basically to get way over here without having to go through all the countries that are in between. Many of the countries that lie in between Europe and China or the Far East, all right, were Muslim countries at this point. The only people who could sail and go through all these countries, all right, were the Venetians, or the Venice, basically. And they had a monopoly on everything that came into Europe, and they gouged people for it. So one of the reasons, all right, that people are beginning to think about different ways to try to get over to the East is economic. Okay. So again, we have a Europe that is dynamic, it is changing, the technologies are evolving. All right, they're building ships that can go further, that can carry more, and there is a lot of money in Europe. All right, since the Crusades, people in the Italian city states have done things like invented banking. All right. Um, as the population begins to grow, there is a tremendous amount of wealth that is being generated in Europe. All right. And this wealth is pushing technology forward, and it is pushing pre-Columbian explorers, all right, to look for, again, different routes to the east and different ways in which Europeans can make money. Everybody likes money. Now, again, 1492 comes at a point where Europe is just about to go into the 16th century, all right, where there will be a lot more of these changes. The main people that are important to our story, all right, is a merchant class. Now, merchants are important because merchants do not have house and title. They're not up in the tiny 1% of wealthy people in Europe. But since the Crusades, okay, merchants have amassed great wealth. So what you have in Europe is this new class of people who are not tied to the ancient houses, but they have a ton of money. They've made lots and lots of money. And the more money they make, all right, the more new markets are created for their good. Okay, more people have a little extra money to spend on this or that. And that drives this merchant class, all right, this merchant class that is moving away from old Europe. All right, these are people who believe in new technologies, who are sort of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. And again, the Renaissance is largely fueled by the money of these merchants and this general phase of curiosity. All right, people are beginning to wonder what lies beyond the borders of Europe. They're beginning to push outward. Okay, so everyone wants to get over to Asia to get the spices. I mean, imagine you had to go through your day here in New Mexico without any green chili, without even anything but besides a little salt. And you had no tomates, and you had no chiles. You didn't have good chocolate. Life would be hard, and you probably would travel by foot all the way to Asia just to get good food. So the overland route to Asia is expensive. It's dangerous. It's largely dominated by Muslim countries that extract heavy taxes on whoever comes and whoever goes. Okay, so people are always trying to figure out how to get around that. All right. Now, new technology. Yay, technology, right? We love technology, but before technology did these things for us, it did a lot for Europe. A true north compass is now available to Europeans, all right? A true north compass, a magnetic compass that always points to true north. A true north compass is really, really essential if you are sailing somewhere away from coastlines. Okay, most sailing that is done during this time period sails either around the coasts of Europe or through the Mediterranean. People knew the Mediterranean pretty well. Africa on the right, Italy on the left, you're going that way. You're fine. In order to do something like Magellan or Columbus is going to do, you need a compass in order to maintain the direction that you're going if you can't see anything around you. Other technological advances are the astrolabe, all right? The astrolabe allows you to navigate using the stars. And when used with a true north compass, it means that you now have the ability to sail towards something that you can't see. And I know that sounds like something like, didn't they do that all the time? Not really, okay? Not in the way they're about to do it now. Now, in all of this, okay, the tiny little country of Portugal really takes the lead here. A charming gentleman named Prince Henry the Navigator was obsessed with sailing, cartography, the making of maps. And the funny thing about poor Prince Henry the Navigator, okay, was that he suffered from terrible seasickness. And that meant that he never really got on boats. He would get so sick, he would vomit all over the place and pass out. So instead, what he does is he founds a school in Portugal. And this Portuguese school brings together from all over the world all of the people that know the most about new sailing technology, new kinds of ships, okay, that you could build. Because one of the things is, if you're going to sail all the way to India, you better have a pretty big ship so that you can put the good stuff in, sail back to Europe, and make a lot of money. He also founds a library of maps, which is absolutely essential. Okay, there are all these maps floating around, maps of the Mediterranean, the maps of West Africa. Portugal is the first country to begin to sail from Portugal down the west coast of Africa. Okay, and it's these Portuguese traders who are first able to figure out that if you round the Cape of Good Hope along the bottom of Africa, all right, you can bounce back to Africa and then bounce over to India. Now that's still a long way to go and it's still pretty dangerous, but Europeans are using all of their technological ability, all right, to try to get to these spices for which there are markets, and this is driven by money. Okay, now, if we're going to talk about Columbus in 1492, okay, we have to talk about this historical idea that particular events, regardless of what we think of them in the 21st century, okay, are at the crux of the evolution of our world. And 1492 is one of those events. Europeans coming to the New World has effects that nobody really could have foreseen. Largely for indigenous people, they are catastrophic effects. But for Europe, basically the world that we know today begins in 1492. There's just no other way to say it. So again, the difference between history and commemoration, right? We have to talk about Columbus. We have to talk about 1492. We don't have to have a statue of Columbus if we don't want one, but we have to talk about it. Okay, so let's talk about it. Now, Columbus was a cartographer, okay, somebody who copied maps, somebody who studied maps. He was from Genoa in Italy. And he, for most of his life, is a Genoese cartographer, okay? And he has one really interesting idea. All right. Now, we all should hope in the entirety of our lives that we have one really interesting idea. So, first of all, nobody thought the world was flat. The Greeks understood that the world was a sphere. And by the way, the world's not flat, okay? Please, just don't hurt your professor and say that. But all of the maps, basically, for the world, all right, started with Europe and they went east. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, okay? There was travel east. There were interactions between the East and Europe, and they went south. They knew about Africa, sort of. And nobody really had thought to go west. Now, if you've ever stood on, say, the East Coast of the United States and looked out, okay, your first instinct should not be just to go towards something you can't see. So again, Columbus has this idea, okay? What if we sailed west, went around the world, and came at Asia that way? Okay, so first of all, he's correct. You can do that. All right, you just have to go down around the Americas, okay? So he was correct. Now, secondly, until the end of his life, he thought that he had found China. So he wasn't really correct. Get it? So Columbus first goes to the Portuguese, okay? And he says, hey, Portugal, I got this great way that you guys can get around everyone else who's having to go these other routes to the spices. And we can go this other way and it's going to be great. And the Portuguese say no. All right. The most advanced school of sailing and navigation say you're just crazy. There's nothing over there. And we don't even know if you're going to come back around ever. So Columbus takes all his stuff and he's all sad. And he goes to the king and queen of Spain, Isabel and Ferdinand. Now, Isabel and Ferdinand have just basically reconquested all of the Iberian Peninsula. All right. They are fabulously wealthy and very proud of themselves. And Columbus, all right. Now, a lot of people say bad things about Columbus, and most of them are true, but he was a smart guy. If you look at the argument that Columbus makes to the Portuguese, it's all about navigation. If you look at the argument that Columbus makes to Ferdinand and Isabella, it's all about little baby Jesus. Why is that? Because he knew that their senses of crusading Christianity would push them to support his endeavor. Basically, Columbus says, look, I bet there are people out there who've never heard of little baby Jesus, and they're going to go to hell unless you pay for me to go out there and find them and teach them about little baby Jesus. Okay, so now we clearly have this intersection of religion, people who are legitimately religious and who believe about spreading Christianity to people. I don't mean to make fun of that. And economics. Okay, these things are never separate from each other. Very few people who went on these sorts of endeavors, even if they believed in this crusading Christianity, didn't really think they were going to get rich, right? So all of these different kinds of motivations pushing Europeans out, none of them are on their own. Okay, so we think about these 3 G's when we talk about this: gold, glory, and God. All right, and most Europeans who are part of this age of exploration, all right, fall somewhere in between these 3. But again, they're not really all that separate all the times. Now, what Columbus does is he has these 3 ships, and I'll tell you the names, and I don't care about them. But again, he sails out of Spain. Okay, he stops at these little islands off the coast, and then he just sails west. Columbus lies to the crew. He says he has a map locked in his room on the boat, on the ship, that tells them exactly where they're going. He doesn't. He has no idea what's out there or where he's going. What he does know is that with his true north compass and astrolabe, they sail largely due west, although they sink a little further. Now, if you think about it, you know, there's a great deal of bravery involved in doing that. All right, Columbus's sailors, okay, who are a pretty rough and tumble group, nearly murder him. Okay, they run out of food, they run out of water, and they run out of rum. That's the one that makes you want to murder people. Eventually, all right, as we all know, all right, they bump into today what is Haiti and the Dominican Republic. They meet people there, the Anahuac people of the Caribbean. And they meet them in terms of the way that Christian soldiers would have met a large, you know, Muslim army. So the folks that live over there, obviously, are pretty surprised to see Columbus. They seem relatively friendly. Columbus makes landfall, all right, leaves his brother there and goes back. Now, most of the guys that they leave there, okay, are interested in only a few things. They really want to find gold. Most Spaniards, right, were really filled with these myths of these cities of gold, as we know here, right? And the crazy thing about the Caribbean, beautiful, beautiful place, not a lot of gold. So interactions between Spaniards and these indigenous people begin to go south almost right away. Spaniards are perpetrating a great deal of sexual violence on indigenous women. They're trying to enslave this population to dig for gold. It really goes poorly for the indigenous communities in the Americas. Okay, so we can't get away from that fact. Um, Columbus goes back, says, I found all this amazing stuff. I found these people. By the time he gets back on a second voyage, the settlement is destroyed. There's been warfare there. There have been disease there. All right. Now, Columbus initiates a period of European exploration. I put that in quotes of the New World. Okay. To Europeans. And this generally goes very poorly for the large settled populations of indigenous people in the Americas. The main ravager of indigenous people, again, is disease. All right. Europeans have lived in close proximity to their farm animals, pigs, stuff like that. And so we developed various kinds of immunities to lots of yucky diseases. And indigenous communities in the Americas had none of these immunities. So they're just ravaged by smallpox, by all kinds of even small time European diseases. Possibly up to 80% of the indigenous population of the Americas is destroyed within the first 100 years of contact. Now, indigenous populations are incredibly resilient. All right. And many of the folks who are in this early generation are still there today. Some are completely eradicated. Some are mixed in. It's a very, very bad run. All right. So when we want to think about why people might be against a Columbus statue, all right, we want to think about that. Columbus ushered in this very dark period in the indigenous history of the Americas. Now, the Spaniards also killed plenty of indigenous people. The Spaniards believed that they had the right to enslave people. And one of the reasons that the international slave trade of people from Africa begins is because so many indigenous people in the Americas are killed off very early on. All right, so the lust for gold drives a lot of this. So again, as native peoples are ravaged by disease, and I also want to say it didn't take native peoples that long to figure out that the Spanish were really bad news. Okay, so that your best chance at having your family survive is to avoid the Spanish at all costs. So they also just dispersed. They just got out of the way. Now, just before this, okay, the Portuguese had been exploring the west coast of Africa. They had found in Africa very affluent and diverse communities that wanted to trade. And one of the trades that begins to develop along the west coast of Africa is the slave trade. All right. So again, you could say Columbus started the slave trade. It's not really particularly accurate, but he is one of the first people to bring various kinds of people back and forth across the Atlantic. All right, you can say any mean thing you want to about Columbus, and it's absolutely true, but 1492 is one of the single most important dates and the events in the creation of our world that we live in today. Now, we also have to think about the fact that lots and lots of people left Europe. All right, they left Europe for the promise of something better. The vast majority of them die. Very, very few people get wealthy. All right, and these were largely poor Europeans, okay, who again were promised something better. Life in Europe was pretty rough. All right, you did not There was no social climbing. There was no advancement. There was really nothing. Okay. And so a lot of these poor Europeans throw their lives, um, on these ships in order to try to better the lives of themselves and their families. So when we talk about, um, you know, exploration and colonialism and all these things, just remember that the folks who came over from Europe, um, you know, largely were just folks, right? Um, so we don't want to demonize people too much, right? The Spaniards did terrible things and things that by our moral standards today simply don't hold up. Um, but a lot of the just plain old average people who came over here trying to make a life for themselves, I think we want to be careful about asking ourselves what we would do, um, in that situation. So we have the Columbian Exchange. All right. The Columbian Exchange basically is the exchange of plants, animals, disease between these two communities, who never had contact in the past. Now, yes, the Vikings probably made it to very northern North America, up there by, across from Newfoundland and stuff. But you know what? The Vikings came and they got their butts kicked and they left. So we're talking about not only exploration, okay, but settlement. It's a difference. Now, some good things happen in the Columbian Exchange, okay? Europe had never seen turkeys before. They'd never seen tomatoes before. Some things that we associate with the New World, bananas, are old world. They're from Africa, but they come to places, especially in, say, Central America, right? And they're able to grow in cycles that they've never been able to grow before. Sugarcane. Okay, sugarcane is imported from the old world to the new world, but it grows in the Caribbean like they've never seen it before. Sugar becomes this major, major industry because you can continuously grow there. There's no off season. Tomatoes. All right, tomatoes come to Europe. Chiles. All right, different kinds of chocolates. Coffee. Okay, imported from the Middle East, imported from Africa, comes over to Latin America and grows in crazy ways that no one has ever seen before. So, coffee and sugar, all right, are these new empires that are constructed. Now, the main labor force for both of those things is slaves. All right, so the New World provides to the slave trade the market for labor that it previously did not have. There had been slavery in Europe. It had been relatively low scale. It had been sort of like house servants and stuff. And but now, all right, what really drives the terrible aspect of the slave trade is this demand for labor, because you could have these huge plantations in the Caribbean. All right, and Europeans start to go ape shit crazy for coffee and sugar. They've never had access to them before, and man, they like them. So empires that still exist today are literally built in about the 150 to 200 years after 1492. Now, there's also bad things that go in the Columbian Exchange. As I've said, disease absolutely ravages the Americas. The only thing that comes back across, all right, is syphilis. Very, very terrible sexually transmitted disease that ravages Europe. All right, it wasn't seen in Europe. They caught it from wherever you catch things like that over in the Americas. Really bad scene. Eventually, it makes you go insane. So I guess there's that. All right, these environments are radically changed by this introduction. Now, in 1494, okay, the Pope comes in and says, look, I don't want Christian powers fighting amongst each other. So I'm going to divide this new world that I know nothing about between the Spaniards and the Portuguese. And it basically draws an imaginary line, which encapsulates the fact that the Portuguese largely get Brazil, okay, which they find completely by accident. And that the Spaniards kind of get everything else. Now, there are some differences between Spanish and Portuguese exploration that you're going to want to really understand for the final. Um, the Portuguese were much more businesslike, all right? The Portuguese wanted to come to the coast of an area. They wanted to trade with people. That's kind of it. All right. The Spaniards were much more religiously involved. All right. They wanted to find the large population centers. They wanted to convert everybody to Christianity. We see this, of course, in Mexico when Hernan Cortes discovers Tenochtitlan, a city that was twice as large as any of the largest cities in Europe. And, you know, what has. Now, other people after 1492 begin to get in on the game. All right. The Dutch, the French, right? There's all this struggle between the major powers for all of these, quote, new to them lands. So here's generally like, you know, the mostly happy sort of slide. This slide looks a little funny here. But again, all of these fruits and things grow over here. People in Europe had never seen pumpkins before, turkeys, all kinds of stuff. All right. What 1492 does, it begins to shrink the world. Okay. All the way from Asia to the Americas. All right. And it leads to a large period of European expansion. All right. Where Europeans use superior technology in order to insert themselves all over the world. The interactions, again, between Europeans and native peoples in the Americas is not particularly good. All right. And we can look back and say, well, one of the main reasons for that, right, is the Europeans were in a fighting mood. They just taken Spain from the Muslims. All right. And they had this idea of conquest, right? Not this idea of going somewhere to meet somebody who's totally different from you and sort of learning from their ways and adapting. No, go there, you kick butt, you take what you want. So it's unfortunate, but it's history. All right. So again, there's a lot more of this PowerPoint that goes over what more was going on in North America before Europeans arrived. But the big things to think about, all right, remembering the Reconquista in Spain, thinking about trade and the ways that wealth and trade pushed Europeans on to go to different parts of the world and steal things. And remembering that, again, this Crusader Christianity, all right, this is not the Christianity largely that we have today. Okay, so go back and look at some more of that PowerPoint. All right, there's another video on there. There'll be a little discussion board up. I think you guys are doing a really good job. All right, please stay safe. If you go out, please wear a mask. Please just stay home and do your homework. All right, you guys take care.